Hello and welcome to NBNU Connect, a space for real conversation about the issues that matter most to nurses in New Brunswick. For this episode, recorded in recognition of National Nursing Week, we wanted to take some time to have a conversation that reflects on the meaning, pride, and humanity of the nursing profession. I'm Joanne, and today we are joined again by NBNU President Paula Doucet and First VP Catherine Little, who many of you may recognize from a previous NBNU podcast. This time, we invite them to discuss what nursing means at this stage of their careers, the moments that stay with them, and what feels worth holding on to in a profession that continues to matter deeply. We'll let the two of you take it from here.
Thanks, Joanne. First, I want to say happy National Nurses Week to all NBNU members. I think that goes without saying that we're very proud of the work that the licensed practical nurses, registered nurses, and nurse practitioners do every day in their communities and their areas of work and taking care of the residents of New Brunswick. So kudos to all of you out there. You said, what does nursing mean to me? Well, that's a big question. And it's a question, and I'm looking here at Catherine, because I think the two of us with, respectively more than 25 and 30 years of nursing under our belts, where do you start? Right? I go back to thinking when I started nursing school and how proud I was to be taking on this adventure, really, and becoming a registered nurse because I wanted to make a difference in people's lives. And so it was really about making a difference and being there and being an advocate for them and help. Like, I think that was the greatest thing for me as a student nurse, and then entering into my career, starting in the geriatrics and then medicine and palliative care units. Those were the units that I think I really learned the most and really had an opportunity to spend time with the patients and the families and doing some teaching and learning and providing guidance. Like, those were the big things back in the day. I think it's changed a little bit now. It's not the same type of nursing.
No, it's not the same anymore. So for me, I went into nursing. I went to the RNA program first because it was a 1-year program. I wanted to see if I liked nursing. I always thought I wanted to be a nurse because I wanted to help people. But I thought, okay, I'll do the RNA program for a year to make sure I like it. And I fell in love bedside nursing. So then I went back to UNB to get my degree because the schools of nursing had closed. Mm-hmm. So most of my career was in the emergency department. No 2 days were ever the same in that place. But what I remember the most is, giving comfort to families, especially, the couple times that I've had to take children to Halifax to the IWK, by providing those parents some comfort that I was going to take care of their child just like they were my own.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing. And I was able to work 13 years in emergency before taking on this role. And like Catherine said, there was never mind 2 days weren't the same. It was like your morning started off one way and your afternoon ended in a different way. You also pointed out, Joanne, is there a moment that has stayed with us over the course of our nursing career? I've got several. And I count my blessings, really, that I was allowed to be part of people's lives in a time when, they were the most vulnerable or they were faced with probably the most devastating news they ever had. And in some instances, some happy news too. But I remember one gentleman in particular who didn't have a family, and he was admitted to hospital, and he was one of those, I think he might have been a bachelor or a widow. I can't remember the exact terms, but just the fact that he never had a visitor. And this man he was a little bit crotchety, for lack of a better word, but I don't know. I took this liking to him, and his prognosis wasn't good. And we moved him from a 4-bed ward into a private room because he was starting to deteriorate. And I was on night shift, and I remember the doc coming in early evening saying, you know what, he's probably not going to make it through the night. And I thought, but I have nobody to call. There was nobody to sit with this man, nobody. And I remember saying and back then there was 4 nurses and 2 LPNs on night shift for 31 patients. I remember saying to my coworkers, listen, if you're looking for me, I'm going to be in room 421. I'm going to be sitting with Mr. because I just can't bear the thought of, seeing him die on his own. And he passed away peacefully at like 4 a.m. And I remember that. Like, he's not my family. He was not somebody I knew, but it was just it was the right thing to do, and I could do it. And that's always stayed with me as a nurse.
To me, I have lots of memories that I think of, but the biggest thing for me is I always wanted to show people some kindness and greet them with a smile, because it gave them some ease knowing that, a little bit of a smile could help ease what they're going through, right? And kindness goes a long way. Even when we're rushed and we're trying to get 100 things done, if you can take like a minute and just sit down with someone and talk to them for a couple minutes, that gives them the comfort, and then they're not as anxious when they're alone, or even when their family member's sick. They feel like somebody cares for them.
Another thing that you pointed out, Joanne, was what's something worth holding on to? For me, when I think about the course of my career, I often used to say to my colleagues, don't let one shift define your career, right? And I've said that several times over the past 30 years. Now, it's become increasingly hard to say that because we know that shift after shift. Nurses are working short, and it's been really a tough go the last number of years. But really and truly, when you walk away at the end of the day, you know that you've made a difference. You know that you've helped somebody. You know that you've been the voice. You know that you've been able to educate, give some reassuring words in sometimes what becomes a very dark time in somebody's life. And for me, that's the personal satisfaction, and that I know I'm doing it. And like Catherine said, it is out of the kindness of my heart that I want to ensure these patients feel heard, that they feel cared for, and that somebody's there for them. And for me, as nurses, whether it's a nurse practitioner, a registered nurse, or a licensed practical nurse, we have all gone into this wonderful career with an education behind us as our base, but a big kindness in our heart. And so never not show that kindness, I guess, to Catherine's point, because that will really change the tone that you might have with your patient interaction. But it also it makes you feel good.
I want to just kind of talk about something a little bit different than the patient. So in my later nursing career, it's all about being kind and, trying to mentor the new nurses that are coming out, right? In a system where, we're always asked to do more with less, showing your coworkers and showing these new nurses, how things can be done and how, we should treat each other with kindness. I think we need to look at that as well. That's always been very important to me, that my coworkers always felt supported and felt that, they could come to me with anything. So I thought I'd talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And that's why it brings maybe me to where let's come out of the facility nursing, and, both Catherine and I holding the roles of president and vice president. We hold these roles because we care about the nurses we represent. Right. And we want to make healthcare better, and we want to make working conditions better, and we want to be advocating for the nurses that we represent. So yes. And sometimes it's a difficult job. It's, we go up against politicians and employers that are really looking at the fiscal bottom line. And we're just saying, listen to us. We're nurses. We've been there. We can actually attest to what our colleagues really need and what they want, and what the conditions are. And right now we're just trying to be that voice for them.
You both highlighted that the career has changed quite a bit over time. So I'm wondering, when you consider, newer or, early stage or even prospective nurses, what do you hope that they don't lose sight of as they enter the profession?
I hope they don't lose sight of what they started out to do. They wanted to go into this career to help people, to make a difference in somebody's lives. Don't let the negativity draw you down or make you not love your career. There's so many options for nurses. They can be a bedside nurse. They can work in all these specialties. They can go to public mental health. They can work in the community. They can work with unhoused. They can go into administration. They can go into teaching. So if you're starting your career and, things you don't think that's a good fit for you as a nurse, there's other things that you can do. But don't lose sight of why you went into nursing. You wanted to make a difference, and you can do that almost anywhere.
Yeah, and I echo exactly what Catherine has said, because I often say nursing is probably one of the most versatile careers. The skills that you learn as a nurse very early on are going to help you throughout your life in your everyday life too. You're going to pick up assessment skills. You're going to find yourself assessing people within a 30-second period of meeting someone, because it's become ingrained in you. You pick up on things that maybe other folks wouldn't pick up on. You have the education, the training, the knowledge, that critical thinking. You're always a couple of steps ahead of a situation, anticipating what potentially could happen. So absolutely, as a young nurse, try to take in as much as you can. And if there's a senior nurse out there that's willing to take you under their wing, by all means, take that opportunity, because as far as I'm concerned, I look back when I started in, 1997, I had an LPN actually provide me with my orientation. And I know that I still see that LPN today. She's retired. But I think I had some of my best learnings from her as it pertained to like prioritizing my day, the way I introduced myself to my patients, what I was looking for. And I often think, you know what, those were the foundations that were being laid for me to be the nurse that I was for all those years at the bedside, and really for the nurse that I am still today as an advocate for the registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, and nurse practitioners of New Brunswick, right? I often think, okay, I've got to take it all in. I've got to assess it. And then I'm going to make a statement, make a decision based on everything that's in front of me. So yes, young nurses, please, brand new nurses, take that opportunity to soak in as much as you can.
Aside from the technical skill and the education required to enter the profession, what would you say nursing asks of people beyond that? The skills that aren't learned through your program.
Empathy, kindness, openness. Like you've got to be okay with uncomfortable situations, right? Because it's not perfect. It's nursing, and the healthcare system is not a perfect world.
No.
And so you need to be able to adapt. And in the moments that you're having difficulty, you know where to go to get the help and the support that you may need.
Absolutely.
Like, I think that's a huge thing, that it's sometimes we put perfection as kind of the bar to meet, when we know that nursing isn't perfect.
So if you could name one thing nursing has taught you about people or about life, what would it be?
That's a big question. Everybody has a story, and nobody deserves to be judged, and everybody needs to be treated fairly. And I think if you keep those to your core as a nurse, we have an obligation to treat every New Brunswicker, Canadian person that enters into our healthcare system equally. And you've often probably heard nurses say, oh, I'll take care of them. And you heard Catherine say, I'll take care of that child like it's my own. And I guess at the end of the day, that's one thing that nursing has taught me, is that you need to treat that person like they are your family, because they are somebody's family. And it goes to my story about the gentleman that I couldn't see passing away by himself.
What I would say is I would want everybody to always treat people with kindness, because we don't know what they're going through at the time, right? So when someone presents for any type of medical care, whether it be the hospital, public health, the nursing home, anything like that, just be kind, because someone could be struggling and you don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
And what do you find personally that it takes to continue caring, in a profession that asks so much? Are you still really just connecting with the things that brought you into the profession, or has that, evolved over time? What has kept you here?
I think what's kept me here is I have an amazing support system around me that I can pull on when I'm having those tough days, because I've had many tough days, right? Whether it be, days in the hospital that didn't go well. And, I came from a small community. I know a lot of people. So a lot of times I was dealing with folks that, might have been my neighbors or, friends or my friends' parents, and, some difficult situations. And as a nurse, we can't talk about that stuff with anybody. because of privacy. But I knew I always had a good support system around me and my colleagues at the time at the hospital. And just like in this role, I've got a great support system around me that when I'm having a bad day, I can call on, any one of those supports to say, listen, I just need to be grounded again. Please tell me, I'm not going off the deep end. I need some support here. I need some help. And so recognizing that you can't figure out everything all the time by yourself has led me to be able to reach out to those to say, listen, talk to me about this. Have you ever had this situation happen to you? What's some advice that you can give me? And I think that's what really keeps me going and getting up every day. I say I have the most privileged position, right? Because I can get up every day and I love coming to work. I love doing my job, but I can't do it without that support and a very supportive family too. I often say my mother doesn't understand what I do. How can I be a nurse and not be in the hospital? But my mother's 82. And so that comes with a little bit of, explaining it on her part. But she is supportive of me, right? And I've got a husband that understands and supports me. So I think that's the important piece too, is that you surround yourself with folks that can prop you up when you need that extra little help.
I think it's because you want to. If you didn't want to keep caring, you wouldn't stay in this role. I love being a registered nurse. I have always loved it. There was a time, though, that I said that I would never let my daughter go into nursing because at that time, I did an interview that said that on TV, that I said, we were just so short, the violence, everything was just so negative at that time. And I kind of fell down that hole and thought, holy smokes, where am I going? So I took some time, I reflected on what was going on. I reached out for some more supports just for me and, got back very quickly to loving what I do. And, my daughter's in nursing. I love it. She's going to make a difference. So because I cared so much about doing what I wanted to do, that's what's kept me in this. In doing this, I have a new role now here in the office, so I'm away from the bedside. So that's been a little bit of a challenge. It's been an adjustment. But, for 6 months, I've worked on things here and, I feel that, this is a different type of nursing and I'm loving that too, because I get to work with all of our members and be a support for them.
It is a huge transition. I remember saying that to Catherine. It's, when you leave a busy emergency department and now you're coming into an office, we recognize that not everything is an emergency here, right? Because we've come out of the emergency world. And it's a huge learning curve and an adjustment. Nurses are used to like hands-on, go. And now we're looking at policies and we're dealing with, employers and government and we're looking at meetings and we're looking at memorandums of understanding and collective agreement language. And so it's a different type of skill set that we need to pull on. But thankfully, we learned a lot of that in our nursing career as well. And so I often say we're fortunate. We're very fortunate in what we've learned, what we're able to bring into the office to better support our members. And I think that at the end of the day, the roles that both Catherine and I hold in this organization, we hold them proudly. We take our jobs very much to heart. We want to do the best because we've seen others represent us and we want to do that same representation fairly to our membership. So I think that's worthwhile noting.
Absolutely.
And your roles go beyond, working just with patients, working with colleagues, physicians. I'm curious what positive impacts you've had in terms of working with the families of patients around you.
I can honestly say that one of the nicest things that has ever occurred is receiving that thank you card, right? I was just doing my job. I was doing my job to the best that I could, caring and providing, the best nursing care that I can. And I have a shoebox at home and I have a lot of thank you cards from families that said, thank you for the kindness you showed to my mom or to my dad or to whoever or to me. And in that moment, I wasn't looking for a thank you or an accolade. I was doing my job. And but that tells me that I was doing my job well and it got recognized. And I think that goes 1,000,000% more than anything else, that when a family can recognize that you have provided them with, comfort, expertise, care that they needed in that moment, that goes a long way.
I'd have to say the same thing. You get some thank yous from families, especially the ones that, you've gone out and really advocated for. I've got a couple situations that I can remember that I knew that something was wrong and I had to advocate to get the extra care that they needed. And, I remember 2 significant thank yous from the families that said, if you didn't advocate, we wouldn't have had this extra time. I don't do it for recognition. I did it for the family so they could have the time and to get the best possible care for the patient.
Yeah, and I can remember one time I had a director of nursing actually come up on the floor, and I thought, oof, directors of nursing didn't come up on the floor back in the day very often. And she came up and she had an envelope in her hand. And I thought, ooh, what's this? And I was a link nurse. And she said, Paula, can I speak to you for a minute? I said, sure. She said, I have something for you. And I thought, oh my, what did I do? And it was a really nice letter. And I still have that letter today. She's retired now and I see her frequently. But it was a letter that she received from, like, the families could put comments. Back in the day, I don't know if they still do it, they had comment cards that they would fill out, satisfaction cards, either the family or the patients. And this one patient's family wrote this big paragraph on the nurse that worked the shift. I had worked overtime on a weekend, and the nurse that worked the night shift and what they did for their mom. And they were a Francophone family. And I mean, French is not my primary language, but I did, my best. I worked a fair bit in French. And I just remember, treating this lady like she was my grandmother, like she was an older lady, and she was just the funniest little thing. And I mean, she died shortly thereafter, but it was the recognition of how the family saw my interaction with her and making her comfortable, making the family feel at ease. And that made its way down to the director of nursing, who wanted to come up and give me this. And I was just like, wow. And I was a fairly young nurse at the time. It was probably, like 4 or 5 years into my career. And I thought, wow, like, I really am making a difference. So I think those are the kinds of things that stay with you and, make you proud of the choices you've made to become a nurse and to help folks. And, as we, talk about Nurses Week and the theme this year, that the power of nurses to transform health. I mean, it's a pretty broad theme, but we transform people's lives every day. And I don't think we recognize the power that we have to do that as nurses. And so, I go back to when I started this podcast saying, Happy Nurses Week, like, be proud of what you do every day, to the LPNs, to the registered nurses and the nurse practitioners. This is your week to celebrate. And this is your week to really reflect on where you are in your career, where you are today versus where you started versus where you are mid-career. And absolutely, it's changed and it's tough and it's all of that. But don't dwell on all the negativity. And I think, like Catherine said, you have to look at the positive of what nursing does and what it brings to the table.
Absolutely. And I would just like to say that, for this Nurses Week, New Brunswick nurses are all a pretty big deal.
That's Catherine saying.
Thank you both for taking the time to have this conversation with us, and for the honesty and reflection and care that you brought to it. Conversations like this help us remember why nursing matters and reconnect with what we're carrying forward together. For National Nursing Week, we want to honor not just the challenges of nursing, but the meaning, commitment, and humanity that nurses bring to their work every day. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in and reflecting alongside us throughout this episode of NBNU Connect. Stay connected. Watch for updates on our website and social channels. And thank you for everything you do for the people of New Brunswick every single day.